You all please sit down. We're ready to start. Where are you? Shelley Salter, you've come here on your birthday. Where are you?
Where are you, Shelley? Perhaps she's not here yet.
So yes, and she's working. Well done, Shelley. Happy birthday. In relation to the minutes of the board meeting that was on the 21st of October, does anybody have any comments? Or are they taken as approved? You've had them. Yes, we have here a notice from Jeremy, who has asked for an amendment to be made. Ajax Parade and Mitzvah Day, 18th November 2018, introduced by Denise Lester and Laura Marks. The Board of Deputies is proud to support Ajax in honouring the fallen. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the end of World War I, a significant anniversary. Thank you. I'll take those as approved. Now, we've got quite a bit of time today, which is a good thing because you will have more time to talk if you want to. So it's a good time to have your say. We do have a guest speaker, so let's invite him first and give a very good welcome to Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg, Senior Rabbi of Missouri.
First, I'll speak rather generally, but I'll bring in the specifics I want to talk about as I outline some of the details of the festival which we're all looking forward to later today. First of all, the miracle of Hanukkah, the miracle that the Talmud describes in one single, very short passage repeated nowhere else in Jewish literature. So it's not a question of whether it's history, it's more than history, it's our story. The story of the Maccabees defeating the Seleucid Greeks, returning to the devastated temple, searching the ruined precincts, and having the courage to find and light the little bit of sacred oil they find there. This tradition has had spiritual approaches and practical activist approaches. The spiritual approaches are epitomized by the Hasidim, who said that this hidden light in the ruins of the temple really represents the sacred in this world. It's hidden, we don't see it, but there's God's light in every human being, in all of life, in all of nature, and our art is to find it, to make it visible, and understand that the world burns with a sacred glow. That's what it means to be a religious person, that's what it means to be a Jew. To the activists, particularly beginning with Theodor Herzl, perhaps not beginning with him, but he picked up this thread. It's not about miracles. The Hasmoneans were fighters. In the creation of the State of Israel, in the days of the Haganah and the early days of Tzahal, they were the most significant prototype of the Jew who fights for their land and for their identity. The cave of the burial of the Maccabees at Modi'in became a shrine. And there is a wonderful picture of the first Hanukkah when the State of Israel existed in 1948, of runners, a man and a woman in army uniform, each carrying a torch and running from Modi'in, I presume in relay, all the way up to Jerusalem to light the Chanukiah there. And there's a modern Israeli song which says there was no miracle. It's actually we who have to do this for ourselves. And people will be familiar with the Hanukkah song we sing today, Mi Yemalel Gevurot Yisrael. Who can count the mighty acts of Israel? Of course, the original wording is the mighty acts of God. But this has become Israel because we've understood that we need in this world to be active and to speak out and defend ourselves. These two traditions are often seen as divergent. I see them as convergent. Our challenge in this age is to take the hidden light of our spiritual tradition, our values, if you like, our sense of the divine and the sacred for those who experience the world that way, and be active with it to take it out there, our values and our spirit, for our sake as Jews and as our contribution to the whole of humanity in the public square. Setting that background, here's some details of Hanukkah law which take me to the details of what I think is so important about the Jewish community and about the role of the Board of Deputies, and again, for which I'm grateful. The Talmud speaks of lighting ner ish uveto. Each home, each person has its light. We are marking today the arrival in London of the first Kindertransport train, which left Berlin on the 1st of December. And there are gatherings at Liverpool Street and many commemorative events. We're very familiar, we should be at least, with those who went to make a huge success of their lives, but have also encountered people who suffered all their lives long. People who perhaps never felt they could return to their Jewish identity. People who are scattered and people who are lonely. And I think about this, each person and their candle, and how important in times of challenge, which I believe we're now living in the world and for Jews, to reach out to each individual. I appreciate the work of Jewish Care, another fantastic cross-communal body, because every person and their light matters, older, younger, living in any part of this country or elsewhere, alone or in community. And I believe that we need to connect and gather these lights, because in times of challenge, hostility, growing xenophobia across the world, the voice of populism, including anti-Semitism, to be alone is much harder than to be connected. But we bring these lights together, each light, on the Chanukiah, on our collective. And as well as our individuality, our collectivity matters hugely. I was at, and very moved by, the gathering and vigil for the families, the killed of Pittsburgh, which the board organized with great sensitivity and huge inclusion at no notice, as these things invariably are. It is so important that we gather all our lights on the Chanukiah. This is a cross-communal body. Different denominations are welcome. Jews of no denomination, Jews who experience their Judaism as cultural, are made welcome here. This is of such importance. I have a warm friendship with the chief rabbi and with colleagues across the spectrum. The more we can embrace the fact that we need different doors to our Judaism, that thank goodness there is an Orthodox, a liberal, a Reform movement, a Limud, a Jewish book week, a Jewish film week, and I will of course mention the Masorti movement. All these doors matter, and to come together on the same Chanukiah, it is really, really, really important. And at times, like was mentioned earlier, Ajax, one sees our solidarity. What do we do with that solidarity? Having lit our Chanukiah and each light, where do we put it? The Talmud says you put it birshut harabim. You put it in the public domain where people see it. You go out there in the public square. The public square is not always an easy place to be, but it is an important place to be because, as I said earlier, we want to make our values, our community, our needs and our voice, and sometimes the challenges we face, like anti-Semitism, known in the public domain. So Hanukkah in the square, at Trafalgar Square, is in a way a symbol of something much, much greater. The Talmud goes on to say that if it's a time of danger, and you can't put your Chanukiah out there, you light your lights on the table, hidden, and that's enough. But we want our lights as Jews to be out there before the world becomes too dangerous to do it. And that is also about making connections. I'm ex officio a president of the Council of Christians and Jews, and I see the connections being made there. I'm also a member, and Orthodox and Reform and Liberal colleagues are in all these bodies, of the Council of Rabbis and Imams. I appreciate the importance of talking to people of other faiths, Jews through the ages, and it includes actually Israel for all its independence. We survive in this complicated world by making relationships. And sometimes making those relationships isn't with people who think eye to eye with us. Sometimes relationships have to be made quietly, carefully, cautiously with people we do not like. But I'm a person who believes that one opens the doors, one puts one's light out there in the public square, one invites other lights to join one. And quietly or openly, one makes relationships with one's friends, for sure. One keeps them as friends. And somehow one also has to talk to people with whom one doesn't agree. Because no discourse, no light. Almost the last part of what I want to say. What are the lights we put out there? What are they actually burning for? I haven't really spoken about that. They burn for our values. And those values, in the history of Judaism, we're very lucky to live in the kind of world we do because broadly democratic societies share or aspire to the values at the heart of our Judaism. The first is super obvious. In fact, they're all obvious. It's life. Wir seinen do. That's what the Kindertransport really celebrates. The saving of life in spite of everything. And another Jewish cross-communal body, which I very much admire, is World Jewish Relief, I think, which does magnificent work and includes rabbis and members and synagogues of all denominations as its supporters. And we're there to support and defend Jewish life, but also to stand up for all vulnerable life. And one of my heroes at the moment is Lord Alf Dubs, who said, as being on the Kindertransport, he wants us to help other refugee children. And for a while we've had refugees living in our home. But it's also, and this is something which troubles me every day, it's also the life of our planet. It's also the life of nature. Judaism believes that this is God's creation and that we must not destroy it through global warming, through our waste. And I'm very pleased that the board is looking seriously and positively at being the kind of the formal owner of the Eco Synagogue project, in which I've been a leader and which I have the strong vocal support of the chief rabbi, and it needs to be held cross-communally. Equal of value, or next in value, nothing is equal in value to life, is truth. And speaking truth to people who do not always want to hear it, and I know that the board has been at the forefront of this, is hard. But we are in a world of post-fact, a world which is frequently a world of the loudest soundbite, whether true or not. And it's become the case that people sometimes don't care whether what they say is true, so long as it's populist. We're returning from an age of empiricism to an age of myth, and it's extremely dangerous. And Judaism has said even of God, amitihu, God is a God who loves truth, and Judaism has stood for truth even where it's challenging. And putting the importance of the discourse of honesty, truth, and integrity in the public square is a role the board has taken and will take, and we must all take. Two more values: chesed, the Torah of loving kindness. Judaism is a religion which has, I think, at its peak, the values of loving kindness, and my other and last one, the values of tzedek, the value of social justice. These are values which we need to epitomize in our conduct, in our communities, find solidarity with in all other organizations who work for them, in a society, in a world which has become crueler in the last years. And there is no equivalent to the ordinary acts of loving kindness. For them too, the Chanukiah in the public square must burn. The last thing I'm going to say, I promise I will finish, is a word about the shamas, that kind of snuffed out candle after it's done its duty of lighting the others. The tradition is that on a Chanukiah, the shamas is higher than the other candles. I often puzzled about this because most people think of the kind of the servant as, God forbid, lower. The height of the shamas goes back to Abraham. When Abraham's 3 angel guests sit, the Torah says, Hu omed alehem. He stood above them to serve them. The shamas is about service. Ultimately, Judaism is about service. It's about service of God in a religious sense. It's about service of the Jewish people and our values. And in its widest sense, it's about service of humanity. And that's what putting our Hanukkah lights out there in the public square is about too. Thank you.
Would anyone like to come to the stand to ask any questions or say anything? Well, please.
Lionel Koplowitz, Senior Past President. Madam President, I think we should all be very grateful to Rabbi Wittenberg for his very positive statement here this morning. And at the same time, I think we should congratulate him on the very excellent piece in the Times yesterday when he wrote about the Kindertransport. I think it was the most brilliant article, and I think he deserves our appreciation of it. At the same time, there is one error in it, though. I think that I must bring it to his attention. He referred to Stanley Baldwin's statement in December 1938 and referred to him as the Prime Minister. But he retired as Prime Minister in 1937, and Neville Chamberlain was then the Prime Minister.
It was his broadcast to the nation in 1938 to persuade people to take more children into their homes. He was not speaking as President. Indeed, that is correct.
But he wasn't the Prime Minister.
No, absolutely not. No.
It was a brilliant article.
Thank you.
And we thank you for it.
Thank you.
Irene Mansfield, Muswell Hill Synagogue. This is not a rhetorical question. I really want to ask you for information. You talked about God's light being in each human being. Is that true of wicked human beings too?
It's a great question. I hope the board doesn't mind theology. It's a great question. The ideal of Judaism the answer would be yes. There's an extraordinary passage, with this I'll respond to your question, by the Rebbe Kalonymus Kalman Shapiro, who became known as the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto. And he was in the ghetto from its inception until the autumn of 1943, when he was taken to Transnistria and eventually murdered. And he describes the light in all things and in Torah. And in the middle of the Warsaw Ghetto, he says, even in the lowing of cows and the sound of the birds, and in all human beings, and even in this evil, although utterly distorted. It's an extraordinary answer, although utterly distorted. And I think we have to hope that in human beings, I mean, we all do some things which are bad, but really evil, somewhere that light exists, although in some cases one really struggles.
Excuse me, it's the first time I've spoken here, so I'm a bit nervous. It's a great pleasure to listen to you.
Sorry, welcome, and could you give your name
I'm
and your
sorry.
constituency?
Right, yes, I've forgotten that completely.
You're with friends.
Right. Hello, friends. John Lawrence, West London Synagogue. What I'd like to ask you is, because I think that the question of global warming and waste, etc., are probably the most single fundamental questions of all. They'll override everything in the end. What is the eco-synagogue you spoke of?
At first, I'd actually thought that this was what I'd been invited to speak about solely, but realized that I'd got this quite wrong. So the Eco-Synagogue is a project that I've been very involved in from its inception. We learnt it from Eco-Church. It is an online tool which asks communities to consider all aspects of their energy use, their waste, their environmental footprint. It looks at the use of buildings, the use of land, the use of teaching opportunities, the use of preaching and the liturgical year, and it assesses the impact on families and homes of members of that community. Once one has logged in and become part of the project, the community scores itself, and it's got this competitive edge of getting a bronze, a silver, or a gold. It has involved over 1,000 churches across this country, and when we launched Eco-Synagogue, something very gratifying was communities were represented from across the denominations. It's a very useful tool because one learns all kinds of things from it about what one's doing and not doing, and we are very keen. The Chief Rabbi has expressed his strong support for it, and we're very, very keen that it be anchored in a non-denominational, inclusive space like the board, and that as many communities as possible join it. At the moment, sort of my community's taken an initial initiative. We've employed somebody to resource it. That is, okay, I want my synagogue to move to green energy. Where do I find it? Who are good suppliers? Who can I ask advice from? We're going to try and change the way we talk about driving. Where do you know how to do that most effectively? We've begun, as has Muswell Hill Synagogue, I think Norrisley as well, with green kiddushim. We've stopped throwing away unrecyclable plastic. We've started washing up. It's a first step. We've a long way to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was an excellent question.
Yeah, thank you for asking it.
Leela Cumber, Deputy for Wembley United Synagogue. What do you say in this era of Brexit? What do you say to Jews who, and we're all products of immigration or immigrants here, what do you say to Jews who are opposed to immigration?
It's a great and really difficult, really difficult question. It's something I encounter sometimes, but I have to say I'm quite lucky in my community. There's been a huge support for asylum seekers and refugees, and we've run a drop-in. I think the drop-in was a model for other drop-ins. So I'm lucky enough to be spared that challenge. but there is something about the last passenger to manage to get on the bus saying, now close the door and driver, please drive off. I believe two things about this. I believe our own roots, and this is what my parents were both refugees, had a huge influence on me. They said to me, from the experiences we've had, we need to learn how to behave towards others. I hear it said, and I don't dismiss this, there'll be people coming into this country with anti-Semitic stereotypes and anti-Israel views. I'm sure that's true. And what will be the future? I don't see that the future will be better for trying to exclude such people. And I've also had the experience of having a young Iranian man live in our house for 6 months, and we helped him get permission to remain here. And he says when he encounters now Iranian friends who have things to say about Israel with which they were brainwashed when they were educated in Iran, he said, I stand up and say, the family who helped me are Jews. So I'm hoping that we can do our best, but it's a challenge.
Thank you.
On? No, thank you. If that's everybody who'd like to say something, Rabbi Wittenberg, thank you so much for giving up your valuable time this morning.
It's a privilege to be asked.
No, I believe you have to run off now. Can I say your insights into Hanukkah and the words that you spoke about the work we're doing here at the board, which really resonate with what we're trying to achieve. I'm sure everybody will agree with that. Thank you. And can I just say with your ecosystems, I was actually on the Communities and Education Division, and we have a group of social action, the board social action group, BODSA, and that is the group that's actually taking this partnership forward. And I wish you well with it. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you. Thank you.
In relation to Rabbi Wittenberg's very wise words, including no discourse, no light, there has been quite a bit of information in the press this week about Angela Rayner. So I propose to say a few words and then give you all time to perhaps reflect on what I say, and for you then, if you wish, to ask questions either in the divisional statements or to reserve that for the President's statement. So I want to say that Angela Rayner has been asked, the Shadow Secretary, to represent the Labour Party at the board's Hanukkah party. She is one speaker, part of a lineup, which includes representatives from all the main parties, including a senior cabinet minister, the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Vince Cable, and the SNP Westminster leader, Ian Blackford. Angela Rayner is not Mr. Corbyn. Based on conversations with Angela Rayner's team about the citation of Finkelstein in the Facebook post, we believe that this was clumsy rather than malicious. It is still unacceptable, and we said so publicly and demanded an apology, which we had in just an hour. In terms of her suitability as one of the speakers at the parliamentary engagement event, I would reiterate what has already been shared. The community faces an unprecedented level of challenge, and these decisions in uncharted waters are not easy. However, it is our belief to win the argument, we cannot simply leave the pitch, curse our luck, and hope for better. We need to engage robustly and to try to bring people around. Angela Rayner's apology for that past citation of Finkelstein following our intervention is the sort of thing that we are seeking to achieve. There is no evidence that I have seen that she has read the book, and I understand that she has visited Auschwitz twice.
Engagement with Angela Rayner is particularly important because first, as Shadow Education Secretary, her remit covers Jewish schools, university campuses, and other priority areas of policy for us and our communal partners. In that light, she has had meetings with the JLC and attended JLM events. Secondly, she is a highly regarded figure in the Shadow Cabinet and in the wider public, so being able to put our arguments to her could be key to bringing about changes in the current dynamic. 3, giving her a platform is unlikely to give the impression that all is forgiven about Labour's actions. Quite the contrary, she will hear both from our speakers and from other community members about the dismay that we have felt about so much as what has happened in the party. The spotlight is now firmly on Angela Rayner. So can you please reflect upon what I've said, and then I'm sure lots of you may have points that you wish to put across at the time of the President's statement, if not before. What do you want me to say? Okay. Thank you. Joe Millis, sorry, I couldn't see you. You've got your hand up at the back.
Joe Millis, Bromley Reform. Thank you for that, Marie. I think it makes it absolutely clear that while she may be on the front bench, Angela Rayner is most certainly not a Corbynista. I have a question, maybe in 2 parts. Do you think perhaps that other issues are at play here, given the providence of where these attacks have come from? And second, if you think that, is there not a conflict of interest going on here? Thank you.
Right, I'm going to thank you very much for that, but I think that we should let's stick to the agenda and come back to this in the President's statement, because I can see about 20 hands. So it's a very good question, so we'll come back to it. Okay, so we'll carry on. Can I just do a couple of welcomes before we move on as well? The board has a new head of community engagement, Sarah David. If you'd like to put up your hand at the back, everybody, so you know who Sarah is. So a big welcome. And Mazel Tov also to Jess Mindel, who along with the JSOC of Cardiff, where are you, Jess? Hands up, don't be modest, okay? She has defeated a BDS motion at Cardiff University Student Union AGM last week, and that really deserves a round of applause. We're going to come on to the divisional reports. You probably will have noticed that Edwin is not here. Can I just say that he has got some personal circumstances that prevent him being here, so I hope that you will be able to bear with us. Can I ask Sheila?
Sorry? We don't know. Vice Chairman.
I'm sorry, I don't think Richard Benson is here, so we will have to move on, and I will try to deal with questions in relation to that statement. But can I ask Sheila to present the International Division report, please?
Yes, good morning, everybody. You should have my reports sent out with the paperwork this week. Again, been really busy. Thanks to Marie, Gillian, everybody has done so much hard work with meeting with other communities, heads of missions, ambassadors, and students. So much work has gone on, as you can see. And thanks to Marius, my board support, the International Relations Officer, happy to take any comments or questions on the things that have been happening since our last meeting. Thank you. Okay, well, I'd like also to thank all the members of my division. We've had 3 meetings, just briefly. We are looking to forming working groups to produce information on communities throughout the diaspora, so as we can have something concrete that will come forward through the board. And everybody on the division has been working really hard, and thank you all for your help. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, could you please present the Finance and Organisation Division report?
I'll just refer to my own report. There are some broad headings that I just want to cover. Overall, the picture's fairly benign, continues to be fairly benign. We're still more challenged on the income than the expenditure side of the equation. I think spending's pretty much under control. Pleased with that. I'll jump to the very end of the report, which I'm sure you've all read with astonishing levels of interest. About half of you step up pretty regularly to help out with divisions. Some of you weren't even elected onto them, but you turn up and you contribute. And there's quite a few of the rest of you who visibly and palpably get behind the board's efforts to get its message out to particular communities, particular organizations that you represent. Not everyone does. Not everyone steps up when it comes to the fact that we are self-funding, and we really do need your help. And for the next 3 years, until we crack this particular nut, although there's an awful lot of work going on at divisional level and with the staff and with the HOs, you know, the reality is I will just bang on and on and on for the next 3 years about the need for each and every one of you to get behind our efforts to take care of the income side of the equation. We cannot take any of it for granted. We have a working group that's being headed. It's one of the ones that's got going already in this triennium. Simon Hockhauser, who was our very capable vice chair the last triennium, is heading this. We're looking at the very basis for how we fund ourselves. You know, root and branch, just because we have to have a set of expedients in place for what we do 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the track. But without your individual and particular support, we're just not going to get anywhere. We will continue to be in a position where, by and large, we do pretty well because we're pretty good at controlling expenditure. The income matters. And some of you represent organizations that haven't even paid for your representation. Sorry to carp like that, and you know, because I'm the first one to bristle when people step up and ask me questions that appear to be carping. But overall, those of you who've got behind us, it's fantastic that the dinner was a success on a like-for-like basis. All credit to Sheila for leading from the front, and the staff and everyone on the committee. You know, we had an increase of over 25% in terms of the take on that, in terms of the profit, which is what actually matters with that. And you know, that was amazing. And I think the working groups within the division have absolutely hit the ground running, and all credit to the people involved in those. That's really all I have to say. If anyone has any questions now, please step to the front. And if I can't address them now, I'll do my best, you know, off microphone.
Actually, I wasn't going to speak today because I decided I'd had enough to say. But I just want to say to Stuart that you really underestimated yourself. The dinner, for those of you who weren't there, was one of the best events the board has done in years. There were people at that dinner who came to the dinner just to show solidarity with the community. People who you'd never seen at board dinners, and I'd done many of them. And I think, unfortunately, it's a side effect of the times in which we live. And I think that there were people there who wanted to show their solidarity with us, with the Jewish community, and with the board at the head of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Stuart. Robert Fessenstein, Prestwich Hebrew Congregation. Well, I'm not going to be necessarily terribly popular after that, but I wanted to answer your question in relation to people stepping up. I didn't step up, and I didn't step up for two reasons. The first was, and I'm not having a go, I'm just expressing my view, is that I didn't like the idea of the speaker, and I didn't like the idea of one of the guests. And as a consequence, I decided not to go. I emailed Gillian and let her know I wasn't going. The second reason I didn't go was because of the cost. I'm self-employed, and taking into account the expected contribution, which I don't dispute, of £250, plus the rail fare, plus an overnight stay, plus the loss of my chargeable time, I reckon I'm looking about £1,000. And I didn't think it was, for my purposes, justified. So when you say people didn't step up, there were a number of reasons why they didn't.
That's certainly the case, but there is a free riding element as well. And I appreciate that there's an opportunity cost for all of us in everything that we do. And I don't take what you're saying as contentious. We're all entitled to our individual responses to who speakers are and who guests are and so forth. And yes, that's one set of reasons that people might come. But overall, I do think that there are a number of deputies who don't quite do enough. And there are also constituencies that haven't paid for their deputies to represent them so far. And that does, Robert, that does concern me. And I know who they are. We may start publicising that in due course if it goes on for too long. But thank you for that question, please.
Sorry, can I just mention the speakers that we had? Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, made a very supportive speech. And just the week before, he dropped everything to come to the vigil for Pittsburgh. And he has been somebody that has really supported the Jewish community and stepped up. The other speakers, Cressida Dick, I think she's an amazing woman. She's shown incredible support to the board, and I think is an amazing, inspirational speaker. And Moishe Kanter works tirelessly at the European Jewish Congress, and he gave an excellent speech of support. So I'm actually very proud of the speakers. And if there is going to be concern, there was mention about one of the guests. If that's Emily Thornberry, she is the Shadow Foreign Secretary, and I think... Thank you. We don't like to have arguments from the back of the room and to have unruly deputies, please. There is a place for people to talk, and that's not the way. Stamping our feet and shouting is not the way for the community to behave.
Hear, hear.
As Rabbi Wittenberg has wisely said to us, every person and their light matters, and it matters how we use it, especially when we are in the public square on live streaming. Would you like to carry on?
Brian Humphreys, Finchley Reformed Synagogue. I think there has been mention in the past of employing somebody to help the board with fundraising. Can you tell me where we are on that?
Yes, that's Sarah David, who was introduced earlier. And she was referred to in the Lost Treasures report before the last board meeting, but thanks for the question. Now, can I just say, it's really great to have people running up to ask me questions, but is this a me question or a Marie question?
If it's me, I'll answer, but I'm sure you're more than capable.
Okay, and I do apologise to those of you, I'm just going to say, after the last 3 years, I was told, be nicer to people who ask me questions. So if I was over-emollient towards Robert, I'm sorry, but... please.
Whilst I agree, Flora Frank, British Emunah, whilst I agree with Flo, and it was an amazing dinner, and everybody was admirable in what they said about the support of Israel. Stuart, you keep saying about the challenges of finance, and thank you again for your very good, this time, sorry, I don't know the word, how to say it in the politest way, but your very kind report on, I put it that way, on the finances. But you do keep bringing up the challenges, and I appreciate that. This is not a criticism. But I want to say that you've got to realise that there's a lot of disquiet in our community. I'm British Emunah, so I can't, but I am from Edgware United Synagogue and other synagogues, and I'm quite active in my local community, which There is a lot of disquiet. There are people who do not, they're reluctant, and some of them are withholding levy to the board. We have to be aware of this, and we've got to take it in note. And, you know, you're talking about the board, the dinner. Somebody's made that point. It costs a lot of money. And not everybody's there, and not everybody hears all this thing. And I don't think that the community gets enough of combating from board vociferous voices, and it's all to do with the levy about combating anti-Semitism, expressing our bond with Israel, and educating about Judaism. They don't. I know we do wonderful work. I'm very proud to be with the Community Education Division. I know the work we do. I'm sure Defence and the other international. But it's not, we do not hear it enough. You are not vociferous enough. You're not working hard enough. I have to say it like that. I'm trying to put it as politely as I can. That's why I hesitated.
I don't know why you're hesitating. You're being entirely polite and constructive.
And so I just say we have to be much more vocal.
I wish you were a member of my division.
So we have to be much more vocal. We need those levies, and people are not coming forward with them. You have to take that on board and do something about it.
I'll tell you what we're going to do next time. Gillian did a fantastic presentation and film about exactly what the board does at the annual dinner. So what I propose we do for the next meeting is that we play this so that everyone can have a reminder of exactly what we do.
But thank you for that last statement question. Please.
Dorish Metterling, New West End Synagogue. I wasn't going to say anything at all, but I was moved by a couple of somebody who spoke up one or two before me, from the carping faction. First of all, I wanted to address the point about the minimum fee. I think the board and Stuart's team have said clearly you don't have to pay your £250 because every pound is actually profit. So that's no reason. That figure alone is no reason. And the second thing I want to say is, particularly the carping faction, those of you who were not there did not hear the tongue lashing that Marie gave Emily Thornberry. It was unbelievable. It was fantastic. And furthermore, Sadiq Khan laid into Emily Thornberry and the Labour Party like you wouldn't believe. So please, don't speak from the sidelines, speak from knowledge.
Brenda Friedman, Northwest Reformed Synagogue. I just wanted to make an extra point about the cost of the dinner. Last meeting, one of the younger deputies suggested that there was a special dinner for younger deputies that wasn't so expensive. And I think that might have been lost because it came quickly.
No, it hasn't.
Right, and I think it would be a really good idea so that some of the younger, we're trying to attract younger members, that they could come to a less sprawnsy do, but also come to the board.
Okay. Yeah.
No, they don't want to come to dinner. Well, you can have some other sort of
Flo, that's a point well made from the floor.
Yes.
This is something that hasn't been forgotten.
Right.
It's a matter of translating this into something that works. Maybe they don't want to come to a formal dinner, we don't know.
When I was young, we used to have all sorts of fundraising things, and young people liked
But when
to
we
come.
were young, pop music was listenable.
No.
If you see what I mean.
But you can have a ball, you know, that you dance at. It's not a great expensive dinner.
But in the end, what I would make one point, and some of us know who some of you are. Some of you were kind enough to make donations in the best of all ways, anonymously, to support younger deputies and younger people coming along. And when there was the figure of 60% of people gave over £250, some of them were rabbis, some of them were people like Cressida Dick and other very important people, and other people we wanted to have. And some of them were younger people. We don't expect them to stump up like that. But thank you. Very good.
It's not lost.
Very good and constructive. And if that's all, I'll try to be as emollient next time if I can. But thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Amanda, can you please present the Defence Division report?
Thanks, Marie. Can everyone hear me? No. Can you hear me now? Good. At the last board meeting, I was asked about what we were doing about the safety of students on campus. The safety and well-being of Jewish students and staff on campus continues to be a high priority for us, and we continue to support and work closely with the UJS in this and to help them where we're asked to. Since the last board meeting, we've had a couple of opportunities to meet with those at the very top of universities. I met with Marie and with UJS with the principal, Ed Byrne from King's, to follow up on our previous meetings where they updated us on progress following the events where they clearly had come up short in ensuring student safety. The week after we met, they had the Israel Society hosted Mark Regev, the Israeli ambassador, and he also had a chance to meet with the principal. And following that meeting, they followed up with us to make sure that we were up to date with what had happened. There are still lessons to learn and there are still things to do, but because we now have a regular contact and an open dialogue, we're able to support and engage with them much more robustly and openly. Things didn't go as well at City University in London when the Israel Society were hosting the Israeli ambassador, and that meeting had to be postponed because his safety couldn't be secured and nor could the safety of the students, and they couldn't comply with the requests from both the embassy and the police. But I did follow up immediately with the president, Professor Paul Curran, and I spoke to him just earlier this week where we shared our concerns and I got a chance to better understand what had happened and seek assurance that this wouldn't happen again. Because there are still concerns and there's still more to do, we've organised another meeting which will be joined by the CST and the JLC and UJS, and that meeting will be in about 10 days' time. I also wanted to refer to something that builds on my work in the last triennium as the gender equality champion, and talk to you a little bit about a conference that happened earlier this week, the SARA conference, which I know that both Gillian, Marie and I were able to participate in different parts of. It was a conference organised by the community and the APPG on anti-Semitism, the all-party parliamentary group on anti-Semitism, and the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, looking at gender-based anti-Semitism, women against anti-Semitism against women. It was a powerful event with some important statements being made by the government and all parties. And it shone the light on anti-Semitism and misogyny, but one example I think stood out. It was that of the Prime Minister, Theresa May. She just had a grueling 2.5-hour grilling in Parliament, and her to-do list that evening was pretty high. But she still came to the conference. She said, "It's not what you say, it's what you do." Anti-Semitism and gendered abuse experienced by women has to be stamped out, but just saying so won't happen. And so the conference, bringing people together to look at what action can be taken, is really important. And it's one of the issues that we will consider within the division as we go forward through the plan that I have mentioned in the report, and which we hope to sign off very, very shortly. If anyone has any questions on the report or other things, please let me know.
Robert Sachs, Belsize Square Synagogue. Madam Vice President, I've been having a little trouble with my iPad. I wanted to get it all sorted out, hasn't worked. Can't complain about an age problem, because Moses was the first person with a tablet to download data from the cloud. But I had more to put to you. I wrote to you this week with a question about the hate crime against a man in Devon against whom foul language was used. It's a matter of concern to me that the Board of Deputies is not giving direct action to combating anti-Semitism by ensuring that hate crime against Jews is investigated by the police, and if there is grounds for prosecution, is referred to the Crown Prosecution Service. Can you tell me what is being done in specifically regard to a man in Devon? Did you receive my email, do you know? I sent you an email, man in Devon who was called a Yid something, and I posed a number of questions. Thank you.
Robert, sorry, I'll respond to that immediately. I mean, firstly, apologies if I didn't reply to you. I was travelling this week. That's no excuse. I don't actually recall the email, so I'm not putting it down to your iPad or my email, but I will, of course, follow up on it and not least be in touch with the CST to understand where it is with the CPS.
Thank you.
Paul Edlin, Glasgow Jewish Representative Council. Amanda, I noticed in your report that Director Philip Rosenberg had a meeting with the chairman of the Conservative Party, accompanied by another member of staff. My question to you, and this also applies to Sheila Gewald, because I noticed this pattern happening, is it is normal protocol in the past that these meetings between elected members of government ministers who are effectively elected members of government meet with board honorary officers and board deputies. That has been the protocol which occurred. I see Flo Kaufman nodding because it happened when she was vice president and ran the international division as when I ran the international division. And I want to know when this protocol changed, because I noticed a lot of meetings between elected government officials happening between staff members only without involvement of deputies in any way. And this is not, I believe, what the board is meant to be doing or running its affairs. This is very concerning. In the past, the protocol was the staff assisting, like the director, would meet with the people who were going beforehand to brief them. The staff member would attend with the elected deputy and honorary officers. They would take notes, but they would not be a part of that meeting. And afterwards they would debrief and write a report, and that report would be seen by that division and the deputies. There's no report of these meetings coming forward, and deputies have asked for reports and not seen them. This is very concerning to me. It's a pattern which we must change. The board is about the deputies, and the deputies running their affairs with the staff assisting them, not the other way around. The protocol usually is that staff meet with officials only, not with elected representatives of government or opposition.
I'd like to say that as Vice President of the Defence and Interfaith Relations, I had the privilege of working with our past President, Jonathan Arkush, who has done an amazing job. I don't know when that protocol was, but it certainly hasn't been in any time that I've been the Vice President. We do have a professional staff team, and honorary officers go to appropriate meetings, but our professional staff team, headed by Gillian, who has of course been a member of state and has a huge amount of experience, is a minister of state, is more than able to decide who should be able to go to what meetings. For the staff team, I'm sorry, she does. She is in charge of the staff. It's my decision, but on a day-to-day basis, Gillian is in charge of the staff on an operational basis. I decide what meetings I think I need to go to, or our honorary officers need to go to, but that is the way we have to be nimble and effective as an organisation. We can't be tied up in bureaucracy, or we won't be effective.
I think things have moved on. I think, Paul, you've gone back to your seat. Paul, it may well have been the protocol in the past. I think the protocol today is that, certainly with my division, is that I am in regular contact. I have weekly calls with each of the 3 people that professional staff members that work with me on the team. We talk about what happened last week. They give me reports of meetings. We talk about what's coming up this week. We talk about what's coming up in the next month and the next 6 weeks, and we talk about who should be at meetings. And if I'm not available for those meetings, we talk about which other deputies, either from my division or elsewhere, can be involved. So I feel up to date and informed. Where reports are relevant to the division, we have set a protocol, a set of guidelines on how we will report that back to the division, and we're working through that with them. And it may be different from what's happened before, but I think we're having a lot more external meetings than we ever had before.
Thank you. Paul, sorry, can I have some sound? Sorry, I know, it keeps going off. Yeah, Paul, you mentioned my name as well. Can I tell you that I work really closely with Marius, and Marius is so on the ball, and sometimes these meetings come up in a matter of hours, and I do my very best to be available for whatever I can, but I can't always attend, and we have the choice whether I go or nobody goes, and... Okay.
I also want to make it very clear that the final say and the ultimate say is always my say as president, and I am satisfied at who is attending meetings.
Sorry, Paul. Yes, sorry, Stan.
Can I just make the supplementary point? The fact of the matter is the board is an organisation of deputies elected democratically. And that means we're here for a purpose to contribute. It's always been this process for 250 years, whatever it's been. To say you're just changing it because you've got great staff, I know we've got great staff, but the deputies have a part to play. If they don't have a part to play in meeting with government in this way, then what is the point of these plenaries? It's a waste of time. Now, Sheila,
yeah.
Platform, I say this to you, elections come up every 3 years. People here know why they are here. They're here to represent, they do their work well. When they go to meet government, I have been with deputies to meet government at the most senior level, and I can tell you they perform fantastically at these situations, briefed by staff. If you choose to change the protocols because you've got a great team, fine, but remember, elections will be coming in 3 years.
Right, can I just come back on that, please?
Sorry, I want to actually make it clear. In the time that I have been a vice president working with Jonathan Arkush, we haven't had deputies turning up to meetings with ministers, and I'm not quite sure what ministers would say if deputies did start to attend. We've got
That's why you've got divisional boards.
Sorry, I am speaking now. We have honorary officers and we have a professional staff team. We can't just say all the deputies are elected and they can come along to see ministers of state. It's not something that is possible for an organisation to work like that, and the deputies have got a very big part to play. There's no change of protocol. The way that we work is the same that I've done throughout working with Jonathan Arkush. So I think we have to trust in me as president, and I am satisfied who attends, and we liaise with the HOs, and Sheila clearly wants to add to something.
I just want to let you know, Paul, that next Wednesday, Stanley Soffer, who is about to speak, who is the Deputy for Cardiff Reform Synagogue, and me, as a Deputy for Cardiff United Synagogue and Senior Vice President, are going without board staff, but with board support, with members of the South Wales Jewish community, to meet with a South Wales coroner. There will be no staff member present, but we have been briefed, and we are more than capable for representing our views at that point. So, you know, it's a case of what size, what reaction, what group of people can achieve the best outcome. That's what it's all about. We don't want a troop of people in a room making introductions that can't be as effective as the professional staff. We are fully briefed, we are fully cognizant, but it's about outcomes, and that's what we're working towards. Thank you.
Next, please. Otherwise, we did have lots of time, but we're getting to the point of a big queue.
Stanley Soffer, Deputy for Cardiff Reform Synagogue. The second contribution from the Celtic Fringe will hopefully not be as acrimonious as the previous one. But it's very rare that Cardiff or Wales gets a mention at board meetings other than when Sheila is addressing you. Today, we've heard about the very successful outcome last Thursday at Cardiff University, and we're all terribly grateful for those people who put in such hard work to defeat this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel motion. But Amanda, you've also mentioned, of course, in your report, Jenny Rathbone, the Labour Assembly member for Cardiff Central, in whose constituency the 2 Cardiff synagogues are based, and in whose constituency the vast majority of the Jewish population of Cardiff actually reside. Very few vote for her, and one of the reasons for this is that she is prone, unfortunately, to make remarks that are either anti-Semitic or anti-Israel. You've dealt with one of them in your report. The Jewish Chronicle also referred to a tweet from a short time ago when she said, Israeli government continues its relentless campaign against @Jeremy Corbyn, why are our media not investigating this level of foreign interference in UK politics? So when this meeting came to light, I, for one, was not at all surprised at the comments that she made. And in fact, in 2014, during Operation Protective Edge, excuse me, she tweeted this on 2 occasions. 170 residents of Gaza concentration camp killed by drones and Israeli fighter planes. What outrage if 170 Israelis were killed? Double standard, question mark. Now, I challenged her about that when I was chair of the South Wales Jewish Representative Council.
You're on Amber.
Okay, and what she said was, I was not comparing Gaza to a Nazi death camp. It was a concentration or internment camp such as the Anglo-Boer Wars. Now, those are her explanations. Deputies can consider
Thank you.
how good they are.
You didn't get a chance to answer your question,
but will the board please take note of this when considering her so-called apology?
Thank you. Next from Amanda. Don't forget it's about the Defence Division.
Absolutely.
report.
This is to the Defence Division. David Safi, Mosaic Reform. It would, of course, be entirely inappropriate for the board to take a view or a position on Brexit per se. However, within the next few months, I think it's highly likely that we, all in this room, as residents and in many cases citizens, of course, of the UK, will find ourselves confronting an economic, political, cultural, even constitutional crisis in this country, following the meaningful vote, following whatever the consequences of the meaningful vote, and of course, following the departure from the EU on the 29th of March. That may stoke a great amount of divisiveness, insecurity, and even possibly xenophobia and intolerance toward minorities and former immigrants in this country. Will the Defence Division therefore reassure me, it may be that you have already done so, that you will be considering how the board may need to respond if the Jewish community or Jewish individuals are ultimately dragged into the identity politics that are already undermining the security and welfare of Jewish people in many other European countries. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you, David. You'll be aware that the board with the JRC produced a guide, a Jewish guide to Brexit. That wasn't what it was called, but essentially our position on Brexit about 6-9 months ago. And it's within the division's plan to relook at that in light of where we are now, and to consider how it affects us and what we need to do. So absolutely, you can be assured that we're looking at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Mike Sochel, representing Nottingham Liberal Synagogue. In your minutes, Amanda, you quote under the heading of medical matters, you write that the BOD, Board of Deputies, is approaching the government to work on best practice for the new role of medical examiner, to ensure that this reform that the BOD is examining with government leads to deceased bodies being released sooner. And that's because I think Islington has difficulty with their coroner, and now you're moving it out to the rest of the country. So can I please ask you how this consultation is proceeding and when you expect an answer.
Yes, I spotted David Katz in the room. Is David Katz in the room? Yeah. I'm going to ask David to respond to that because David is the board's medical advisor and sits on the division and will have more detail, give you a more detailed response than I would. And I know that David, your voice is...
We have initiated discussions throughout the UK. The first stage will take place, hopefully by, believe it or not, March 29th. And this will be in relationship to hospitals. We are meeting or surveying all those areas where there are large Jewish populations to check on the position with the new medical examiners and providing information for them.
And certainly, Mike, one of the suggestions from one of our deputies, Simon Gordon, was that as that starts coming through, that we should produce some guidelines for both for deputies and to put on the website so that that information is made available to more people.
Nigel Hart, Belmont United Synagogue. Maiden comment. During the summer, we discovered that our local Labour constituency party, Harrow East, had affiliated itself or aligned itself to the Jewish Voice for Labour. This came as rather a surprise to us and a bit of a shock, considering that Harrow East has probably one of the largest Jewish populations in the country. And it's certainly something which the vast majority of our members were totally aghast about. I believe I discovered this by a report that was in the Times, in the Times newspaper, and it said that Nottingham happened to be the first. Nottingham was, I think, a few months earlier had aligned itself. We got together with some of the other shuls in the area, and together with the help of somebody at the board, we provided a letter to go to Harrow East and to Harrow West constituencies, pointing out our concerns and asking them to review this affiliation and to disaffiliate, which would be the view of most of our members. A number of the shuls wrote to them. We also asked them, obviously, to accept the full IHRA definition. I have to say that to date, we've had no real response to these comments. I understand that since this, there have been a number of other local constituency parties have also affiliated themselves to the JVL, and I just wondered whether the board are aware of what is going on at the local constituency party level and what they can provide to advice or information to local communities as to ways of combating it. We have ourselves formed a working group to monitor what's going on, both anti-Semitism on the left and also on the far right, obviously, and also we plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Amanda.
We work obviously through with the all-party parliamentary group on British Jews and with the Jewish Labour movement on these issues. And of course, as you say, you had some support from the Board of Deputies. And it's certainly something that we will continue to do in terms of supporting deputies in writing letters and following up. So, please do keep in touch.
I'm just getting conscious of time, which has gone by very quickly from saying we have got lots of time. So can you try and ask your questions as concisely as you can so that we can
try
get
to
through?
be concise in my answers.
Stanley Volk, Finchley Progressive Synagogue. I'll try and be brief. I was very impressed with Rabbi Wittenberg's remark about sometimes we take our politics to the town square or market square. I can't remember what he said. In early October, there was an incident of some protester, Sharon Claff, spelled K-L-A-F, who is a personal friend of mine, was attacked outside a Momentum meeting and in fact was knocked unconscious and taken to hospital. This matter was brought up at the last meeting, and our chair, Madam Chair, said that as it was a subject of police case, they couldn't comment. It seems now that the perpetrators of this crime haven't been caught. My question is, would it be possible for the board to just send a note, a letter, a recognition of the work that these counter-protesters do? In fact, I used to do it myself with the counter-pressed pro-Palestinian groups. It started 10 years ago. I was told outside Marks and Spencer's at Oxford Street there was a don't go into Marks and Spencer's group. We countered saying do go into Marks and Spencer's group. That's just an example. Now, the methods that they use may not be what the board do, but nevertheless, they think they have a part to play, and I think they do as well, and I think it should be recognised. That's all I ask.
If you listen online, I actually spoke at the Edgware and District Reform Synagogue, and Sharon Clough was in the audience, and I greatly sympathised with her for the ordeal that she had suffered. So that is something that was said to her directly, and I understand that we're still waiting for the police report into that.
But after that, you would be happy to send her a note of condolences, or even now?
Thank you, but we're still waiting for the police report. I think it's important that we all understand.
But she was taken to hospital.
Thank you. I understand, and as I said, it's online. You can go and listen to it. I said to her that I was very sorry that she was attacked. So it's something that's been actually said to her personally. You can hear it for yourself if you listen to the recording. It's on the board's website.
Hello, Ben Wright from the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. So the Defence Division and the wider board utilises its voice to great effect to combat anti-Semitism. This weekend, the Muslim Council of Britain and other Muslim organisations spoke out about the need for greater protections for the Muslim community through an improved definition of Islamophobia, sort of better legal protection. I was just wondering, what support is the board offering or will offer to the Muslim Council of Britain and the Muslim community in general in this?
Okay, thank you. So, as you may be aware, just this week, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims produced a recommendation on a definition of Islamophobia. And similar to, and it is very similar to the IRA definition, with some obviously appropriate things to the issue of Islamophobia. We have always said, as Jews, that no other group should be defining anti-Semitism. And so right now, where we're at, where with this definition as it stands, is that we are interested and pleased that the definition has been brought forward, but it's primarily a debate for the Muslim community to have. And so right now, whilst we're pleased that the definition has been put forward, and we look forward to working with the Muslim community and with government, we'll work with them to combat prejudice and discrimination and work with them as they confirm that definition.
Can I just add that, of course, we're all against anti-Muslim hatred, but it would also depend upon how the definition was applied. So I think we're going to have to wait and see.
I just want... Oh, we've got more people. Sorry, I was going to say thank you to everybody, but...
Robert
keep
Stone,
going
Finchley
briefly.
Reformed Synagogue, and I'm a proud member of the Finance and Organisation Division, and I'm going to suggest that that division takes a look at the point that Paul Edlin raised, because I have the greatest admiration and respect. We are really lucky. We've got fantastic staff. They are really capable of doing what they're doing with ministers. But the question is not whether they're capable of doing it, which is the question you all answered, but whether they are competent to do it. When I was in the civil service, ministers spoke to ministers and officials spoke to officials. Imagine the situation where...
Sorry, can I just say that we actually employ people and staff, and
No,
they're competent.
Please, I haven't finished speaking
Sorry,
yet.
they do have an employment...
I haven't finished speaking
I'm sorry,
yet.
they're employees with employment rights, and I really don't think that you should talk about their competence or lack of competence.
I'm talking about their official competence. The word competence, when used by the civil service, means ministers speak to ministers and officials speak to officials. Please, can I get that extra time on my time? Imagine if Marie was in Devon, happened to be in the constituency where the Jewish man was abused, and asked to speak to the MP, and the Member of Parliament said, well, I'm sorry, I can't see you, but you can speak to my constituency secretary. The President of the Board of Deputies is not seen by an MP, but by a constituency secretary. We're doing the same in reverse. When I was in the civil service, if a minister came from abroad and a minister didn't see her or him, but he or she was seen by somebody else, then they'd have every right to feel that they weren't speaking to the proper mouthpiece. I'm not talking about what we think people can do. I'm talking about the potential that ministers might wonder how seriously we're taking it if we won't present an elected official. I'm not suggesting that we deputies should go, but elected officials should represent us before ministers. But I don't ask you to answer that now. I'd like F&O to look into that and to look into those protocols.
I also want to say it's a matter of judgment and circumstance. For example, last Shabbat I was in Edinburgh. I think I can see Edward Green there. And we met about, 5 MSPs together. And that's because Edward has the skills and the local knowledge, and I judged that was something to be really respected, and I got a lot out of that, but it's not cast in stone. And different people have different connections and abilities. So I don't think you can have one rule fits all, but Edward certainly played a huge part in our meeting with 5 MSPs last Shabbat, which was very, very valued. And one of them was a Green who had not actually really had any connections with Jews before up in Scotland. So that was very valued. And we're
Michael Reich, Mosaic Reform. At the last meeting, there was a debate held here at the request of our president, and no doubt we'll have further debates in the future, one of which I can see could well be on the subject of anti-Semitism. Well, we had at the Mosaic Reform Ian Austin, who's very well known as an MP, and who's been accused by the Labour Party and as a result was potentially suspended, that suspension being removed only this week. I informed our executive and I informed Bernice, who very kindly put a notice out to all the members about this. We had no members of the executive came to that meeting. We had no members from the Defence Division that came to that meeting. We had no members of staff who, in my opinion, these are the sort of things the staff should be coming to see what is going on outside in the community. And the only person that actually came to that meeting from the Board of Deputies was the Deputy for Wanstead, who happened to sit next to me at the dinner because I advised him about what was taking place. I think it's a very poor situation when we, the members, put on very, very interesting debates and very interesting items. We had a number of Labour members of Parliament who came to that, but only 2 of us were there from the Board of Deputies, and I think that's a great shame.
3.
I'm sorry, I apologise.
I agree with that, and where at all practical, deputies should be able to come. And in fact, lots of deputies are proactive in arranging meetings, and of course we should be able to show support. I think that's very important. So well done.
And I just really also want to add, Michael, thank you. You did send me details of the report. I was travelling at the time, or else I would have absolutely been there. And I mentioned it to Ian at the board dinner and said I was sorry that I was going to be unable to be there on that day.
Hello, I'm Anthony Adler from St Albans Mizorti Synagogue. It's my first time addressing the board as well. I'm just following up on the previous question asked about the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims' working definition of Islamophobia. I really appreciate the nuanced position suggested on making sure that we follow the lead of Muslim community organisations in identifying their own definition of Islamophobia and supporting that. And I fully endorse the board supporting those organisations in other ways. I just wanted to see whether the board's position had changed. I understand from a previous meeting that when the Muslim Council of Great Britain had called for an inquiry into Islamophobia in the Conservative Party, the board's position was that we wouldn't support them in that because the party chair didn't deem it to be necessary. I just wondered, in the light of recent comments just earlier, whether that was still the board's position or whether we would reconsider offering our support. Thank you.
I'm not aware of the position changing, but at the same time, I'm not. I need to look further into your point. Thank you. And we're going to move on. I just wanted to thank everybody very much for your interest and for your questions on the division's work, and also for all the new deputies who have spoken this morning, and thank you for your engagement.
Thank you. Edwin's not here, as I've said before, but I'm happy to try and take any questions. But we've got two people that would like to come to the stand at this point. Brian Bloom would like to make some points about Ajax, and Valerie Berkson, you'd also like to come to talk about Professor Aaron Klug. And Susan Pascoe, I can just see you there. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Brian Bloom, Ajax. A somewhat lighter note, Madam President. Madam President and deputies, on behalf of Ajax, the Jewish Military Association UK, and the serving Jewish community of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, may we thank you all for your wonderful support at our 84th annual ceremony and parade. Especially, if I may say, our three musketeers, Marie, Sheila, and Denise, and of course Laura and Mitzvah Day. And yes, this year it really was a mitzvah to remember. At this year's parade, we were honoured by the presence of three lords: our own President, Lord Stirling, Lord Levy, the President of the GLGB, and Lord Popat of the Hindu community. Who is one of the Jewish community's greatest supporters. And I think, Madam President, we have a lot to talk about the Muslim connection with the Muslim community, but the commitment should be equally to the Hindu community. You may or may not be aware, Lord Poppet actually stood up and put forward a motion in the Lords against anti-Semitism. I commend you, if you look it up on Google it, it's so important to us as a community that we are supported by our fellow communities who very often have the same problems. Anyway, onwards.
Thank you.
We've
got a few people talking, so...
Okay, the Chief Rabbi, added by Rabbi Major Reuben Livingstone and Rabbi Harry Jacobi, led the service. Harry, now aged 93, and we have lost count of how many parades he has actually participated in. There's been much comment about the decline of Ajax and the parade, However, we are pleased to report that there was an estimated 1,800 marchers plus several hundred spectators participating this year. The youngest Ajax members on parade, Abby Sondak, Royal Navy, and Titania Elizabeth, Army Intelligence Corps. And the oldest member on parade, Lieutenant Colonel Mordaunt Cohen, MBE, 102. We have one more thank you, and this is a big one. Our dear friend and colleague and fellow deputy, Jacques Weiser. After 24 years, Jacques, our Chief Executive Officer at Ajax, is retiring. There is not enough time to do justice to Jacques' Ajax history. It includes the royal family, presidents, prime ministers, Holocaust Memorial, Israel, France, and even the Pope. Jacques' knowledge of the Jewish community and his natural diplomatic skills dealing with, well, just about everybody. Thank you all very much for your support at Ajax.
Can I second everything that Jacques done? We have written to say thank you, and I myself have supported the Ajax Parade since I was about 13, playing my bagpipes with JLGB, and I'm delighted to be there every year. Well done for all you do. Now, I have to manage time because we haven't actually got near the President's statement. It's 35 minutes to go. So could you come and please, can you be brief, or nobody else will be able to talk? Valerie.
Valerie Berkson, the Deputy for the Movement for Reform Judaism.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
Sorry. I'm not very good at this. I just wanted to tell you that we have just finished burying and sitting shiva for Sir Aaron Klug, who was in Cambridge for many, many years. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for his work on the electron microscopy of biological molecules in 1982. He was the director of the Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge for many years. He was appointed the president of the Royal Society from 1995 to 2000. He was the first Jewish president of the Royal Society that we've had since it was established by Charles II in the 17th century. He was a person who, if you went to talk to him about a problem, would always make you feel that you had found the answer yourself, not that he had given you the answer. He also was appointed in 1995 to the Order of Merit, which is a personal gift of the sovereign, and there are only 36 of them in the country. The Times, some years ago, published a picture of the Order of Merit members at a lunch with the Queen, and nearly half of them were immigrants. And Sir Aaron Klug was one of them, because he was born in Lithuania. His family moved to South Africa when he was 2, and he came from South Africa in about 1949. He died full of years and honor last week, and I think that we should be very, very grateful that someone of his ability and his distinguished should be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Susan Pascoe, Israel Community. I wanted to raise an issue in relation to the 5th bullet point on Edwin's report, in relation to staff meeting the chair of Chinuch UK to talk about challenges facing Haredi schools. Now, obviously, Chinuch UK represent Haredi schools as well as very Orthodox schools, the ultra-Orthodox schools, the borderlines between the different sort of schools obviously don't fit into neat categories. So the board, as we know, does represent more Orthodox and Haredi views to government, department officials and ministers on certain issues. Sometimes meetings are below the radar, sometimes they're above the radar. And Chinuch UK met with, a couple of weeks ago, they met with the Prime Minister's Faith Advisor, John Helliwell. So obviously feeling that the board does not represent their interests. And the same week, on a different day, Shraga Stern went with Professor Jeffrey Alderman, which was an interesting combination. Shraga Stern clearly represents the Haredi community, and met with officials from the Department for Education. So obviously there seems to be views that the board isn't representing the more orthodox side of the community, and where the line is drawn, how the board can work with Chinuch UK in representing their interests themselves by the board to government ministers, and just cohesion, not to dilute the board's message and dilute the board's influence.
I think that's a really excellent question. I'm not sure that the Haredi community have decided that Mr. Shraga Stern and Jeffrey Alderman are representing them either. I think Dr. David Landau does an excellent job, and a few months ago we had a meeting at the board with Dr. David Landau and representatives from Chinuch UK to discuss their position. So I think there's further work in progress, but you do raise an excellent point. We can't have too many people, and of course there's another very important party involved in education, which is also Pages. So everybody needs to liaise and work together. But I understand that Chinuch UK are doing an excellent job, and we have very good relations with Chinuch UK. Thank you. Has anyone else got any questions for the... Oh, thank you.
Chaim Ben Sion, Masorti Judaism. The board ran a highly successful initiative called Invest in Peace. It's a shame Edwin isn't here because he was excellent in the one I went to, which is St Albans, of course. Where it was a full house of 200 people. We had church leaders, Muslim leaders, political deputies. It was absolutely brilliant. A reporter from the JC was also there. However, I was very disappointed that I couldn't find any media publicity about those events. Is there any reason for this?
Well, firstly, I'm really proud that you raised Invest in Peace, because this was one of the things when I was Vice President that I really campaigned for, and the staff have put all of their energy and devotion into these, and we've had many of them, and the one I went to at Bushy was absolutely packed as well. I think what you're asking is, do we have an impact report? Perhaps the way we present the work we've done does need some further thought, but everyone has given really fantastic feedback on all of these events, and I'm sure Edwin will be really grateful for you saying that he really did a good job. But we would like to get more of these events to many more shores and keep working. But we need to find a way, you're quite right, on publicising that more, because I think it really matters. It's brought the community together, and it's great to have fantastic dialogue and an opportunity to talk and to listen. Thank you. Is that it on the questions? Okay, so we'll move on now to the President's statement. I will have to manage time. I think we're likely to get a few people coming to the stand. So can I suggest we take the statement as read, unless anyone's got any questions, and we proceed straight to people coming to the stand. And can I say, we have only got 25 minutes and we will have to leave the building. So we already have a queue. So if you can be as brief as you can and as clear as you can, that will be really appreciated. Jerry.
Jerry Lewis, Hampstead Synagogue. Forgive me, Madam President, for my intemperate shouts during the earlier part of the discussion.
I didn't notice.
Not for nothing was I known for many years as leader of the opposition here. Paul Edlin was 100% right, and the response by the number of deputies here will tell you very clearly, before all of your time, myself, Flo, and others who have been officers of this board know the protocols. And I will remind each of you officers, you are elected to lead us and to lead the community. It's not right, the brilliant staff, not right for them to lead delegations to see senior politicians or others. Yes, the nuts and bolts of communal activity, different matter. Please take on board. You are elected to lead this community, and you should so do with the full support of everyone here. And the protocols should be reversed from whatever they are today to what they were before. You can't change the rules of this board like that.
We are, with respect, having questions on the President's statement now, please.
Let me get on to the real business. I am very concerned that in the recent few weeks, a nasty edge has crept into our deliberations. I call it tribalism, off-stage critiques of what's going on. It's not only misplaced, it's highly dangerous for our community. In my 9 years as Vice President, we worked very hard to deal with oppositions and governments, regardless of party. We had a major problem with William Hague when I was an officer of the board, and the President decided to attack William Hague. He was then Shadow Foreign Secretary. We alienated him. The end result was he never spoke to us in all the years he was Foreign Secretary, and before he was a good friend of Israel, he ended up as a critic of Israel. We can't afford to let that happen again. The President and the team of officers we've elected have got the job to negotiate and walk the very difficult path around our community. We cannot have off-stage noises and people trying to destabilise the President and the honorary officers. It's not sensible. And I'll go further.
You'll have
there
to be
are
brief.
individuals, I'm coming to an end, there are individuals here, and I know who they are, who are doing a great disservice to our community. Let me make it very, very clear. We've got to calm the situation we're facing to enable the board and JLC to carry out the core functions in our community. They must engage with various people, some of whom we deem to be controversial. Yes, we must be cautious with all our dealings with the Labour Party. But like the JLC, we have much more important overriding duty to maintain certain links, because as we all know in politics, but no one knows what is around the corner. We cannot afford to be an organisation which doesn't have any links with the opposition. Please carry on your policy. We support you, and I don't want to hear any more off-stage criticism or tribal comments. It's out of place in this community.
Thank you. Thank you.
Natalie Shaw, Barnet United. I have to tell you, unfortunately, contrary to what Jerry's saying, I've had umpteen people in my community wondering why on earth we've been asking the speakers that we've been asking for the last few weeks. It's been very difficult for me to defend that. I understand what's being said, but it isn't necessarily the view outside, and it is certainly not helped by the media coverage that's been out there the last few weeks. If we are to be democratically representative deputies for our communities, we also have to be listened to. And it seems to me that there were a lot of people earlier who did express some reservations as to who's been chosen. Can we please try and have a bit more balance in who's actually put forward? And also, can we ask for who we want rather than asking the Labour Party to choose who they put forward? Thank you.
Robert, I don't want to look mean, but you've spoken, and there's
I won't be long.
Right, you have to be
brief.
really brief, because
very
other people are not going to be able to speak.
Okay,
Please, thank you.
I just wanted to say, you've dealt with the question of the guests to the President's dinner. That was a matter of concern to me, but the veteran Labour MP, Frank Field, who's been a friend to the Jewish people, quit the Labour Party to support us. He's put his career online, I think he should be recognised by the Board of Deputies. He should have been a guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Malvin Benjamin, Hendon United Synagogue. I'm not going to join in people who have spoken before and said, oh, I wasn't intending to speak, but I decided to do so. I did intend to speak. Look, you know, we have a problem in this community. It started with Judas, who invited Mr. Corbyn to a Seder ceremony. We then went on to a principal member of the Liberal Synagogue, inviting Mr. Corbyn to dinner on Friday night. And now we have the board inviting one of Mr. Corbyn's allies to address the Hanukkah celebration. I think that this trend is very regrettable, and I am very concerned about it. I don't agree, Madam President, with all respect, of the second paragraph of your answer to the question of the deputy from Reading. I do not think that we should engage with the Labour Party. I believe that until such time as Labour cleans up his act, then in those circumstances it is premature to start thinking of engaging with them at all. I really believe that we must look at this in a much more cynical way because of the way in which Labour has decided to not to do anything about the vicious anti-Semitism that's emanating from that area. And may I want to say this. In the 1930s, the Board of Deputies at that time made many mistakes, but the one mistake it did not make was to invite Sir Oswald Mosley or his allies
you're
to
wrong.
Hanukkah
You're on red.
situation.
I'm sorry, Angela Rayner is not comparable to Oswald Mosley, and she is not Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh,
thank you.
Sorry.
My name is Shelley Salter, and I'm from the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. I'd just like to have another dig at the Labour Party. I live in the London Borough of Haringey, and Haringey had the highest vote for Remain in the country, and the Labour Council voted unanimously to support Brexit. These people are not representative of the people, and it's very important that democracy in the Labour Party and democracy at the Deputies remains.
Thank you.
Adrian Cohen, Highgate United. I just wanted to emphasise something, actually. In the last month or so, the Board of Deputies has organised 3 fantastic, incredible events, each very different to each other. The first was the vigil for the victims of the appalling massacre in Pittsburgh, which had overwhelming support. People were desperate to attend. Unfortunately, the venue wasn't big enough, but an amazing array of speakers who showed their solidarity to the community were brought at very short notice, including the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London. The second was, as been mentioned, was the Board of Deputies' annual dinner, which again was a sellout. People were being turned away, were on a waiting list in order to attend it. And the third was a seminar that was hosted for local councillors, which again was a sellout. There were 130 local councillors, the vast majority were not Jewish. And it was a most amazing, stimulating day and showed the number of friends that we have in local government in London. And all of this shows that the board is really performing above its game. It's punching above its weight and the top of its game. But you might not have known that because of all the fury that has been stirred up in certain quarters of the media. And to be honest, this issue around Angela Rayner is really, it's not a big issue. It's only one because certain people have chosen to make it so. The fact is, the Board of Deputies has to engage to some extent with the Labour Party. This week, the Labour Friends of Israel had again a very successful lunch at which 17 members of Parliament attended, listened to Mark Regev, the Israeli ambassador, and applauded him, along with Isaac Herzog, the chairman of the Jewish Agency and leader of the Israeli Labour Party. We do have friends in the Labour Party. We have people who are ambivalent in the Labour Party, and we also have a serious problem around the leadership of the Labour Party. Everybody knows that here. But the notion that we shouldn't engage with the party is a non-starter, because this is a party which, it may be unlikely, I don't know, my opinion is as good as anyone else's, it may be the next government. And Angela Rayner is the Shadow Education Secretary, and she is someone, people have pored over her record now, they've dissected it. She has a mixed record, but she's not someone who has said anything anti-Semitic, and she's someone who has attended, for example, Jewish Labour movement meetings and has issued messages of support to the Jewish community. So I think we've got to start looking at what we're doing, the successes that we have. Someone earlier mentioned that we have to be advocates for the board. Well, let's all be advocates. Let's all promote what the board are doing, and let's not be drawn to the carping and some of the negativity that really is unnecessary. So I think all of us should be doing our job and taking out the message of the board to our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Newman from the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. Just a couple of quick points. Stuart, it occurred to me as a member of the FNO, I think it's important that you remind us of our duty to maximise income for the board. I don't know whether us as deputies necessarily know whether or not our constituency has paid. And I think if FNO could look into that and get that information into the hands of deputies, that could be very useful. That was just the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say was to congratulate the board on the dinner. It was fantastic. You gave us an opportunity to hear what people like Sadiq Khan have to say about our community. There's never been a more important time for us to hear that. His solidarity was magnificent, and for giving him a platform to do that, I really want to thank the board. I think it was fantastic that you did that. Thank you. The next thing I just wanted to say was in respect to getting the balance right between having the board represented by deputies and by staff. And what I just want to say about that is I've worked in the voluntary sector all of my life, all of my working life, and it's very clear that we have an increasing professionalization of that sector. That's how come it is that we have somebody as fantastic as Gillian Merron as our chief executive. The idea that it's okay for her to sit down, shut up and take notes while people like us go to these meetings is ridiculous. The top table has to make that judgment. I'm confident that they've heard that there are a lot of deputies out here, a lot of us feel that for certain meetings some of us may have a lot to contribute, and I hope they give us an opportunity to do that. But the judgment has to be theirs, and they have to work with our fantastic staff to make sure we're as well represented as we possibly can be. Thank you. The last thing I wanted to say, and I said I would make my points quickly, is in support of your engagement with Angela Rayner. It seems to me that you have to walk an impossibly fine line. As we just heard from the representative from Highgate Synagogue, there are issues with the leadership, and we know there are issues with the leadership, but you have to engage with Angela Rayner, if for no other reason that a lot of Jewish people have their kids in Jewish schools, and she is the Shadow Secretary for Education. I thank you for your engagement, because I know it's not easy, and I hope that you'll go on feeling that you are supported by the majority of us, because I have every confidence that you are.
Hi, I've never been here before.
You've spoken once before, and we're almost running out of time.
I'll be very quick.
Please.
Can I have this?
Actually, no, Robert.
Okay.
The deputies.
When you were campaigning, you were talking about involving deputies more in the activities of the board. And I completely appreciate what you're talking about how you have a professional staff. In the Defence Division, there are people within the division who have engaged with third parties. Is it possible you might think about putting together a working group to collect in the expertise from many of the deputies here who could add to this?
Well, as I've said to you as well, I view regional engagement as something that's really important, and I have actually said to you that I wanted you to play a big part in that. So we're actually waiting to hear from you, the deputy, as to what you've got to also offer, because deputies have definitely got a big role to play, and we have to find ways of dealing with that.
Working group that is working on the deputy skill matrix, which has been spoken about in the past, is so advanced that it was only logistics that prevented us from circulating something to you all in hard copy today. And by the time of the next board meeting, you should have received something by email, which will be supplemented in hard copy form. I would encourage you very strongly to fill out that skills matrix. We have a whole group of people that are going to pull that together, and I think we'll use
that. That is fantastic, but in fairness to Robert and in fairness to what I've heard today, deputies want, wherever possible, to have a part to play, and that is definitely something that we need to look at to see what we can achieve, so that deputies' concerns are heard and that there is a balance. So I am agreeing with what Robert has said in part. But we have to find that balance, and we have to also be a nimble and effective board and to operate in a professional manner. Thank you.
Jonathan Davis, Golders Green United Synagogue. The raison d'etre of the board, as it says on the logo, is advocacy for the community. I fail to see how we make our voice heard by not talking to people. But my question to the President, given the very real risk Jeremy Corbyn could become Prime Minister, is what plans does the board have to speak up for the community in an imminent general election?
I would love to. Perhaps that's something next meeting we can talk about. That's a great question, but we're in the last 5 minutes of the meeting, and I have to do closing remarks. So Mary, can you also be really brief, because we're not going to have time for any closing remarks?
Very brief. I didn't intend to speak today, and I'm sorry to have to speak. However, I do want to say something about the question of professional staff. We have wonderful professional staff, but the protocols of following it through, and the indication, I think, of yourself or one of the last speakers suggested, that these deputies here, who speak so well to this plenary, are not allowed to speak to ministers and people of that kind because the professional staff know better. I'm sorry, I can't accept that. We have spoken about this, Mari, and I hope we'll speak again.
Thank you for your comment, but I'm not sure that ministers would greatly want to see deputies and not see professional staff. But as I've said, we definitely will look at ways that we can include deputies more.
We will have to agree to disagree, Mari, I'm afraid, because we've all been around a long time and know what the protocols are.
I'm sure you know exactly how to run the Board of Deputies. Right, turning to closing remarks, I just want to reiterate that we will have the skills matrix format for deputies, and wherever possible and practical, yes, of course, we want to make sure that deputies are fully involved, and I'm sure that those discussions will continue, so it's not being dismissed out of hand. Now, as we head towards the Brexit vote, we clearly are entering into a very difficult time in the UK, and a period of political uncertainty. Throughout the history of the Jews, we have been faced in the past with great uncertainty, and in certain times, this has been more pronounced. The story of Hanukkah and the bringing of light always fills me with hope, especially at this time of year. Rabbi Wittenberg has also spoken so positively about the many doors to our Judaism. Every person and their light matters. This must be in the public square. We must stand proud, and there is no discourse without light. We look forward this week to a lot of festive occasions and the joy of light and remembrance. The Mayor of London will be lighting candles in Trafalgar Square for Hanukkah in the square, and there will be numerous candle lighting ceremonies, including the Civil Service, 10 Downing Street, and the board's Hanukkah event in the House of Lords, as well as those wonderful events that will take place up and down the country in your community. This is what matters. This is all part of what we are and who we are. And may I wish you a very happy Hanukkah and say how proud I am that we have been able to discuss so many valuable issues today, and we will take to heart everything that you have said, and we will have a very productive meeting next time, I'm sure. But thank you for everything also that you do, and please all have a very happy Hanukkah. Thank you.